Well, evening. Um, it's pretty late night today, but I decided to start a new run of videos. And the focus of this set is going to be on R plus or reinforcements mode in European ruins. And the reason I feel like there should be something like this in European ruins is because I feel like the biggest barrier of entry for a new player in European ruins is R plus mode. And unfortunately, for better or worse, sorry, I guess not unfortunately, but for better or worse, R plus is going to be about 75% of the games you play in European Ruins because of the way the war map works in European Ruins right now. So, um, the problem that a lot of new players run into is that when you play R plus, if you happen to go first, it sets a big uh, uh, it has a big impact on the tempo your team has in a game of European Ruins. And as a new player who's playing their first couple of games, getting thrown into a reinforcements mode game and having to be first against another player who probably is more experienced or more used to this mode, and having to go 1v1 with that player to try and get your team a good start in the game is a lot to ask, right, for a new guy. So it can be difficult, and I feel like a lot of new players have a really bad first experience when they end up having to go first or even second in R plus. So I thought, and when you look at the forums, there's maybe one or two threads that really give some tips on how to handle R plus, and a lot of them are really old and hard to access. And I thought looking at R plus in a video format, uh, not only looking at the R plus starts of good players, but also looking at the starts of your average player, could help give insight into what it takes to win R plus, or at least do well enough to make being first in R plus a wash at the very least. And I think this is something that should help a lot of people who don't really understand the concepts of R plus, especially newer players. And hopefully this will help clarify some things at the very least. One thing that really tends to catch new players off guard is the starting call in R plus, how it should be formed. A lot of tutorials in European Ruins dictate that your starting call in should be 25 pop, right? Your full 25 pop, which is the max you can have in any call in, and it should be able to handle a multiple different kinds of engagements, right? So it's a big ask for a starting call in. Try and mix up your starting call in to be able to take on kind of all comers, right? And it's even outside of reinforcements, it's kind of hard to get something like that to happen for you, right? But in meeting engagements, mitigated because as a team you can pull your resources together and help each other and counter things, right? But when you're in a 1v1 situation, you're not getting support, and you have to remember the call-in timers are 4 minutes apart, so you're going to be 1v1 with another player for 4 minutes, which is a long time in company heroes and a long time in EIR. And it's a kind of a trap that a lot of new players come into, thinking that their starting column will be able to handle anything, right? I mean, if your opponent's trying to do the same thing, right, it can work out. But there's a lot of micronome, there's a lot of theory crafting that people tend to get trapped in, right? So let's look at here. Here's a generic kind of starting call-in, right? Here's a Fallschirmjäger sniper, a assault flaming grenadier, a tank buster grenadier, a light 80 half track with tread brake, and a Scott car with the MG upgrade. So you've got a bit of suppression. Your anti-infantry, anti-building, anti-support weapon. You're kind of half and half AT anti-infantry with focus fire and tread brake. Your Panzer Shrek trying to scare off any vehicle. Then a false sniper, just because can pick. You could probably replace this false sniper with something a little less risky, like a Panzer Grenadier squad, or just a normal another assault grenade squad or something like that, right? But it's a fairly standard call. Most new players will look at this. Okay, hey, I've got a source of suppression and capping, a nice take round, decent enough AT, and a unit that's really hard and asks questions of your opponent, Fallschirmjäger sniper. The thing is, you look at something like this, and what if your opponent decides, well, I'm going to start with 2 crocodiles, right? Or I'm going to start with a Sherman, right? And suddenly this looks like a losing proposition, right? Or let's say they even go like triple M8s. Triple M8s would give this start absolute hell, right? And so you've just thrown, where is this? This is 200 350, 460, 460, 500, 500, it's about 600 munitions you've just probably thrown away if you run to something like that in R+. And that's what happens to a lot of new players, right? You know, they start with a 25 pop call-in, go into an R+ game thinking, yeah, I can handle anything, right? And then they run to an experienced player who knows about the value of shock and innovation in R+ start, and they lose everything, right? I mean, you know, what you can't mitigate in R+ and company building is bad micro. If the other player is a better player than you probably will lose R+ with R+, right? But what you can mitigate if you learn some R+ company building is losing to a company build, right? You can bring it down to micro instead of company build. And I think the only thing that you players need to learn is, instead of going for this 25 pop call-in, is to try and split your starting call-ins into things that can equivalent to a 25 pop call-in, right? And what you want actually to go with that is a call-in of some scouting units. So in this build, instead of going for this 25 pop build here, right? Instead, try and split your build apart, right? So here's your kind, and what you want to do, you want to have kind of a core call-in you can bring on, right? What you think, regardless of what you're facing, you probably want to bring it anyways. And in your case, be like the HMG 42 and the Panzer Grenadier Squad. That's 9 pop. So you can have a backbone of 9 pop. At the same time, you call them a Technocrat, right? And the idea there is you bring on your backbone unit and you bring the scouting unit and you send your scouting unit to the enemy spawn as fast as possible to try and scout out what they're calling on. And basically, based on that scouting, you can then call on the rest of your call-ins. So let's say, you know, I see a tank, well then I bring the Treadbreaker, light 80 half-track, and 50 mil. Or if I see a light vehicle, any kind of vehicle, I need this 84, I'll bring this in. If I notice it's a really infantry-heavy call-in, right? I'll forget these. Don't waste 9 pop there and just bring in, you know, 14 pop of anti-infantry. You know, here's a munitions half-track, a flamer, a P-Gren, right? And something like that, or even a flak building, right? So if you spread out your starting call-ins into equivalencies that you can bring out and, you know, get 25 or 24 pop into, it works out. Like, I can get, for example, let's say I run into a kind of balanced kind of column, like, you know, I see a Sherman, but I also see, you know, a couple of bar riflemen, right? Well, I'd go HMG 42 support the core here. These two, that's 18 pop. I have 7 pop left to play in, so I can choose. After that, do I want another munitions half-track and a Panzerpower with a flamer? Or do I want another P-Gren? And that depends on what I'm seeing. Do I see a support weapon? Then I probably want the flamer. Do I see, you know, a lot of infantry? Then I probably want the P-Gren, right? The munitions half-track. So a new player should try to split the starting call-in into chunks, to kind of functional chunks, and try and scout out, send an early scout to opposing line, and see what their opponent's bringing before they try and bring their first call-in on. And that'll mitigate things like a triple M8 start or a double Crocodile Sherman start, right? Because let's say if it is something extreme like a Crocodile Sherman, well, it's like, well, I don't want to use my second, you know, that last 7 pop on you know, a munitions half-track and some, you know, Panzer pilots or P-Grens. That's useless if I run to a double Sherman Crocodile start, right? I mean, these two are already liability. They're only there to try and cap some map, right? Cap some map, hold some ground. So, and against 2 Crocs, this would probably work. But let's say it's instead of 2 Crocs, it's 2 Shermans, right? Then even this is not going to work, right? So what do you do then? Well, the thing is, if you split up, you still got 7 pops sitting here. You can bring both these on, right? You sacrifice your credit card. And that's the idea behind the early scout. You send the early scout, and if you see something that needs hard countering, you sacrifice your credit card to get that pop freed up again, right? And then I can do something like bring in a martyr or bring in a 50 mil or something like that, right? So having these flexible opening call-ins, you still want to be over a certain pop level to keep them, you know, keep the penalties low. But once you have this flexible call-in, you can really help yourself as a new player respond to what a more experienced player is doing, unless you really, really trust your micro or your starting call-in. And it's possible. There are some doctrines that give you pop bonuses that help you win that early R+ engagement. But you know, most companies don't have that luxury, right? So this is, generally speaking, you do want to split your call-ins where possible. I mean, you can still have 25 call-ins, especially if you expect the game to be, you know, meeting engagement or Axis or allied attacks, right? But those will only count for about 1 in 4 games you play, right? The other 3 out of 4 times you're going to be playing this mode, and there's always that 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 chance that you are going to be first on your team. So you should be prepared for R+ starts generally right now in this meta. And so that's just the general idea of company building you want to go look into if you're a new player and you're going to R+ and you're not sure what to expect. So this is step 1, right? Step 1 is to make your starting call-in not to be a single call-in, but to try and spread out what you want to bring on to try and mitigate what you could possibly face in a battle, right? So that's a good tip for a new player. And this is just the first video in the series. What I'm hoping to do as the series progresses is collect replays, you know, and analyze collect replays that have reinforcements mode, and analyze the starting engagements in R Plus and see. And it's for my own education as well, because I'm not a great player myself. So I'm hoping that as I watch these replays and I learn why some people succeed in R Plus and some people fail in R Plus, that as I watch these replays and as I analyze them, I hope as I learn, I can help new players who may happen to watch these learn as well what it takes to win in R Plus and what are some general rules of thumb you want to see in R Plus. And that's what I hope to do with this series. So here's the start. Here's what I have learned myself in my limited EIR ability, and I want to use this series to take the next step. So go past the company screen and go into the micro level of R Plus and see how the engagements play out. And I hope that that's going to be a good experience for me, myself, and for anyone else who looks at these videos as hopefully some help for them and learn to play EIR.